I'm James Kibbie, Chair of the University of Michigan Organ Department. Thank you for joining us for this session of our 61st Annual Organ Conference, Passions and Visions. One of my passions is the music of Johann Sebastian Bach, and I'll be discussing and playing some of the Bach works that have been discovered or authenticated in the past 10 or 15 years. I think of this as a shopping tour of some new Bach for recital, church, and teaching. I'm at the University of Michigan's C.B. Fisk organ, modeled on the 18th century instruments of Gottfried Silbermann, and named in honor of my late colleague Marilyn Mason. When I played the complete organ works of Bach in 18 recitals here in 2000, the series included 266 works. When I recorded the complete works about 10 years later on original Baroque organs in Germany, the number of works had grown from 266 to 274. I'm preparing to perform the complete works here again next year in a series of 18 recitals, and so far I'm planning to include 281 works. So in the 21st century, the canon of Bach organ works is growing, thanks to the work of eminent Bach scholars like Christoph Wolff, George Stauffer, and others. Those of us who were around in 1985 remember the sensation when Christoph Wolff announced he had authenticated 33 previously unknown chorale preludes by Bach in the Neumeister manuscript, which had been sitting largely overlooked in the Yale University Library. One effect of this discovery was to set off an international search for other overlooked manuscripts. That search was helped by the fall of communism several years later, making it easier for scholars to access libraries in former communist countries. Of the organ manuscripts discovered recently, the most significant is this one. This is the Corral Fantasia on Wo Gott der Herr nicht bei uns hebt. It's now been assigned the BWV number 1128. This manuscript came to light in 2008 when it was offered for sale. It's a copy of a manuscript once owned by Bach's son, Wilhelm Friedemann. This copy was made by Wilhelm Rust, one of Bach's successors as cantor of St. Thomas Church in Leipzig. This is a major work, worthy of recital or church. It probably dates from around the time of Bach's famous walking trip to Lübeck to visit Buxtehude in 1705-1706. It's modeled after the North German chorale fantasias Bach had known and played since he was a teenager, composers like Buxtehude, Tunder, Lübeck, Böhm. In the North German tradition, 2 manuals are indicated. The elaborated solo voice is on the Rückpositiv. It's the division of pipes closest to the listeners, so the most immediate. And it has a wealth of colorful solo registration possibilities. As in some other Bach works, the 2 manuals are marked forte and piano, indicating contrasting colors, but not a large difference in volume. Bach is working with a vivid chorale text. The subject is conflict, confrontation. If God the Lord is not with us when our enemies are raging, and so forth. Bach uses one of his specialties, invertible counterpoint, to portray raging enemies, tossing contrapuntal lines back and forth from Rückpositiv to Oberwerk to pedal, from soprano to alto to tenor to bass. The crossing of the various contrapuntal lines is an important expressive element. The right hand is sometimes above the left, sometimes below. In the final measures, the right hand plunges from the highest note of Bach's keyboard down to bass G for the last chord. The pedal is sometimes the bass voice, sometimes the tenor voice. For that reason, it works best if the pedal and the left hand are both based on 8-foot pitch. In other words, no 16-foot in the pedal, which was fairly common in North German practice. The affect is well served by having a pedal 8-foot trumpet. For the registration of the Rück positiv part, I'm using the common North German practice of combining an 8-foot reed with the mixture. In North Germany, mixtures were used for solo lines as well as ensemble textures. The opening movement of Bach's Cantata 21 is a sinfonia for oboe, violin, and continuo. An organ transcription of this movement had been published in the 1840s, but who made that organ arrangement? It was assumed it was someone other than Bach. This is the new Leupold edition. The editor, George Stauffer, summarizes the compelling evidence that points to this being a genuine work of Johann Sebastian Bach himself, including this manuscript, discovered in 2004 in the library in Schwerin, Germany, copied by an anonymous scribe in Leipzig in the mid-1720s. Most of the recently authenticated Bach works are youthful works, which is part of the reason they were overlooked. This trio, though, is a mature masterwork, Bach at the height of his expressive power. I love this trio. I've played it frequently on recitals. It's also a valuable teaching piece, a good introduction to the longer, harder trio sonatas. Bach may have used it in that way with his expanding organ studio in Leipzig. The Cantata Symphonia is setting the stage for the chorale Ich hatte viel Bekümmernis in meinem Herzen. I had much affliction in my heart. John Eliot Gardner writes, the Sinfonia is a work of miraculous poignancy. Part of the reason is that near the end, the motion comes to a stop 3 times. The first 2 on a single held note, the last on a silence. The manual parts cross each other, so the registration works best with just contrasting, colorful 8-foot stops, which were increasingly included in Central German organs of Bach's later years. Here on the Fisk, I'm registering the right hand with the 8-foot Gedacht plus the 8-foot Quintadena. Several 18th century writers mention the possibility of playing the left-hand part of a trio an octave lower on a 4-foot stop, which is what I'm doing here. One of the questions for Bach trios is whether to use a 16-foot along with the 8-foot for the pedal. Do you add a 16-foot always, never, sometimes? You'd think, since this is a transcription of an instrumental movement, we'd have that to guide us. I asked my colleague Joe Gasho, and he tells me it's not at all clear whether or not cantatas from this period included a continuo instrument doubling the bass an octave lower. I'm following the example of several eminent conductors who don't use the bass octave doubling, and I'm registering the pedal with just 8-foot. Wolfgang Schmieder published his thematic catalog of Bach works, the Bach Werkverzeichnis, or BWV, in 1950. In 1990, Schmieder published a revision of the catalog that's usually referred to as BWV2. In 1998, other scholars collaborated on a further revision nicknamed BWV2A. Now, a major revision of the BWV catalog has been made and will be published soon by Breitkopf. That will be BWV3. This new edition adds an additional 7 chorale preludes for organ as authentic and assigns them new BWV numbers, 1169 through 1175. 2 are from the Walter Krebs collection of manuscripts, both on the chorale Herr Christ der Einig Gottessohn, Lord Christ, the only Son of God. This is the first in trio texture. The second setting of Herr Christ der Einig Gottessohn is a partita. The manuscript was copied by Bach's student J.T. Krebs around 1714, when he was starting his study with Bach. There are some forward-looking features here. This heading of the first variation is probably a reference to the maniera italiana, the Italian manner, a term also used by Bach in another work. The second variation includes fingering showing the modern technique of the thumb crossing under the other fingers, which Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach says his father pioneered. The fourth variation, with its constant parallel sixths, looks toward the emerging galant style in the 18th century. The sixth variation includes closed position chords in the bass octave, which isn't typical of organ music. It might indicate this variation was originally for harpsichord, but there's another possibility. Using a 4-foot stop alone was common in the Baroque, and this variation comes alive when registered on only a 4-foot flute. Here's the partita on Herr Christ der Einig Gottessohn. 5 of the organ works added to the new BWV catalog are from the Rink collection in the Yale University Library. One is an accompaniment for congregational singing of the chorale Komm, Heiliger Geist, erfüll die Herzen. Come, Holy Ghost, fill the hearts of your faithful. In Bach's churches, hymns were sung in unison by the congregation and choir, led by the organ. Bach could easily have improvised this harmonization, so he may have written it out as a teaching example for his students. This is the Breitkopf edition with the hymn text that's in the original manuscript. This is an example of the German practice of Zwischenspiel, inserting short organ interludes between each phrase of the sung chorale. Sources from the time tell us hymns were typically sung very loudly, and people tended to sing loudly at different speeds. These interludes gave the congregation time to catch their breath and also helped keep them together. Any list of the complete organ works of Bach is just a snapshot of scholarship at that moment. There will certainly be other developments. There's always the chance another unknown work will be discovered. Also, watch for additional information about works that are already known. I'd like to end with the Fantasia and Fugue in A minor, BWV 561. This is a work that's been known for many years, published in the 19th century by Breitkopf and Peters. However, questions were raised about its being a genuine work of Bach on the basis of its style. It didn't look like or sound like Bach to some people. Now it does look like some of the other recently authenticated works. Trying to decide if a work is authentic based on its style is notoriously faulty. It's led the finest scholars to make mistakes both ways. Thinking a work isn't Bach when it actually is, or thinking it is when it isn't. Today, scholars rely much more on manuscript transmission. The provenance of a manuscript. Is it a reliable copyist? The features of the oldest manuscript of the Fantasia and Fugue in A minor point to its being genuine. On that basis, there's no reason to doubt it. The case is as strong for it as for a number of other Bach organ works. So this is an example of a work that's long been known, but just recently welcomed back into the canon of Bach works. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll close with the Fantasia and Fugue in A minor.